Welcome to today's AWI Extension New South Wales webinar, Managing Sheep Nutrition in Dry Times. Today I am joined by Nicole Logg, who will be our presenter for today. And we're going to have a talk about all the things that can help you out at the moment in your production system if you're at that section of the state, because it's a tale of two stories in New South Wales at the moment, who haven't had your break in the season yet. So Nicole joins us from the Riverina today, and she has her own livestock company called the Livestock Coach. So welcome, Nicole. It's great to have you on. We're just going to get Nicole's screen up for us today, and we will kick up.
Thanks, Fiona. I'll just get this onto the right slide here.
Perfect. I have you now. You can take over, Nicole. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. So today we've got the other side of the equation. Last week we spoke about looking at green feed. This week we want to look at how do we manage our sheep nutrition when it's a little drier, and what things we can do to keep reaching production targets and keep our sheep healthy and performing. So today, what I really wanted to go over was looking at a bit of an overview of our whole operational plan, how the timing event is really important to fit everything into the year, and ensuring and following on from that, we need to ensure that the ewes need to meet those condition scored targets for the best performance and productivity. We'll also take a quick look at pasture assessment, things to look out for. And at the moment, I'm looking at also a little bit of short grain pick that comes through when we've had a little bit of rain, and how we can best look after that, and options we can do using things like containment areas as a tool to help that pasture get away and or maximise ground cover. So we'll get into that. And then we're just going to fine tune a few things that we can do with containment feeding to help you do that as best you can as well. So with the operational plan, it can be, a lot of times it's in everyone's head, but it's really good to get some of these things down on paper, be it as basic as you like, but putting the dates down of when things should happen so you can start to plan out your whole year and see where everything fits in the schedule. There's a couple of really key important times, and while joining is really important, the start date and the end date also. So we really want to aim for a 5-week joining, and let's be honest, the rams don't always come out on the same day. So sometimes it's closer to a 6-week joining. But if you can stick in that range, that's a really good start, because that has a flow-on effect to the grouping of your lambing, and also allowing that ewe to recover for her next joining as well. So having those dates in there is really important time. And the next one is pregnancy scanning. So once you pull those rams out, make sure you call that your pregnancy scanner at that time to book it in early to make sure you can hit the right dates, so they can maximise what they can see on their scans as well. So it's around between day 80 to day 90 from the start of joining. So having a nice tight joining of at least 5 to 6 weeks, we can ensure that when they preg scan, they're getting the best results that they possibly can. So once they know that, you can determine twins a lot easier. We also, want to make sure that if your joining's too long, that throws out the scanning as well. So we really want to make sure we get our joining lengths right. Call the preg scanner to book them in, and remember some of your health treatments as well, and or even lamb marking and weaning, putting those dates in there, even though it might not necessarily happen exactly on that day. It's important to have it in there so you know it's coming up, because time does get away on you. The photos on the right refer to trying to be a little bit more efficient when we've got them in the yard. So every time the ewes are in the yards, we really want to condition score them. So in this example here, these are our ewes just getting their pre-lamb treatments while I'm going through and condition scoring them just before lambing, just to make sure if there's anything we need to change or adjust in terms of their feeding program. So there is a lot happening throughout the ewe's reproductive cycle, and this timeline here is directly from the Lifetime Ewe Management course. So we're looking at lambing on the left-hand side, and you can see all the sort of green arrows up above. They're all the things happening primarily within the ewe and the lamb during that time. So in pregnancy, there's a lot going on. We probably don't realize how much is going on during that early stage of pregnancy. Around day 90 is when we scan, and that's when we start to see, from then on is where we start to see some energy differences required between the twins and the singles. And then obviously the flow-on effect for that lamb growth towards the last trimester, and then lambing onwards, all that milk production and lamb growth. The two E's that I have here, that I've added in here, this E refers to the eggs that will be developed in the fetal ewe lamb that she will have for her life. So this is also a critical time for lots of fetal programming going on. This E over here refers to the egg follicle development that starts to occur that will be used for the next joining. So this quite, use sort of right into lactation here. She's got a fairly big energy draw, but this is when the eggs are actually starting to be developed for the next joining. So when we put that all together, this graph here on the left is really our ewe management profile for our area where we are. We've got a lot of autumn lambers and winter lambers in the Riverina. And this just shows, the lines show that the condition score 3 and your targets that you want to aim for. So pretty much condition score 3 for most of the year. Now, once that ewe lamb, she's going to draw off those body condition scores, like she cannot physically eat enough of high energy feed to maintain her condition. Once she starts milking, it's a huge energy demand. So we see that dip there in the graph just here. And then we're sort of hoping for an okay spring to wean those lambs off and let her pick up body condition naturally off the pastures that are available. So that suits us. It might not suit everyone. You need to really understand your feed demand profile and when you've got feed available for lambing. Now, we can grow a lot of crops here too early on to get those sheep growing, and you might like to listen to last week's webinar on what we do there. So the really important thing is that we wean our lambs by 14 weeks of age. So having a nice tight joining allows us to do that because we have a nice grouping of lambs at a much better weight group. So when we wean at 14 weeks, it's really about the ewe though, and giving her enough recovery time in this section here, post-weaning, to let her pick up weight. Now, it's the twin-bearing ewes that we sort of call at most at risk because they will draw off more condition than a single-bearing ewe because they're making more milk, and they've also built 2 lambs as well. So she's the one who's most at risk, our most productive sheep. So we really want to make sure that we look after the twin bearers post-weaning and let them pick back up in condition as hopefully with the season with us. So what I also like to do is start to put down your numbers. So while it might feel like we're doubling up on dates here and when things are happening, I actually have a planned date and the actual date because sometimes it doesn't always quite work out on the same day. But it's good to have what you actually done as well in here. And this is where you start to put your sheep numbers in. So if you've got the right number of rams, you can do this by mobs and you can put in their condition scores. So you're recording all of this data, you know your mob sizes. Once your scanning is done, that's when you can drop in all your singles, twins, and your dries. Use scanned in lamb, SIL is over here. So the actual number, whilst we get a percentage from our scanner at the end, it's also good to have the number of ewes, and then we can work out too how many lambs are actually on board. So this will start to, once we do our lamb marking and weaning, is extended off this page, but once we have all that data, we can look back and say, well, what was our percentage of dry ewes? What proportion of lambs did we mark and wean? So we can look at lamb survival, and we can start to zone in on areas that might be a little bit weaker that we could possibly do better on. So over time, I actually have mine on an Excel spreadsheet. So every year I have it per tab on the worksheet, and it allows us to reflect back a little bit and look for those areas of weakness where we can try to improve from. And sometimes there's seasonal things that what's happened, but it's planning ahead and seeing if you can improve your rates over time. So that's with the planning side of it, we go now into what we're looking at sort of here and now. So what are we looking at out in the pasture? And when we're looking at pastures, we really want to look at 3 main things. It's the quality of the feed, which is really related to how digestible the feed is, and primarily the legume content, because legumes tend to be much more digestible than grasses. So there's a correlation there. So we want to look at the quality of the feed, and we want to look at the quantity of the feed, so the bulk that's on offer as well. So we can have, like right now, we've got some green pick starting to come up. So there's, pretty good quality there. This graph's all a little bit out this season. We sort of out by a good month or two with the very late break. And we can see here anyway that the short green feed is really digestible, quite high in energy, but there's just not a lot of it. Whereas at the other end, at the end of summer, we can have a lot of bulk, but not much quality in it as well. So this graph here really represents the top part of the graph is our better quality perennials and the clovers and legumes and lucernes that come in, whereas the underside of it in terms of the digestibility and energy is really more of our native type grasses. So the energy content of our better improved pastures is obviously there, which because they're more digestible. Now, the other really important thing, especially when it's dry and even at this time of year, looking with the autumn break, is that these ground cover. So what proportion of bare earth do we have across the paddock? These two pictures here are directly from the MLA Pasture Health Kit. You can find that online, and there's a few different examples, but I've grabbed the 70% ground cover example and the 40%, just to show you sort of the relative difference visually between the two. And 70% has been chosen because that's ideally our trigger point. When we get below 70% ground cover is when we want to start moving sheep off the paddock and into containment. And there's some really good reasons for this. The biggest one is it reduces the runoff. So at 40% ground cover, we have a huge runoff of water. When it rains, we want the water to stay there and get into the plants. But when we've got really low ground cover, we see 90 mil per year of water just running off the paddock. When we have 70% ground cover, that's only 10 because it's seeping into the ground. There's lots of reasons for this, as noted on the picture there, but it's really about having that leaf litter. There's kind of this, natural mulch from the plants, holding that water there, and it's actually protecting the soil as well, particularly when it's hot, and also as it cools down, it's keeping that soil a little warmer. But having that ground cover there has a whole host of benefits for the soil and the plant and pasture health, which obviously has an effect on your sheep as well. So in terms of the quality of your feed, if you sort of feel a little bit, gosh, I don't know what it is, where am I looking for it? There is the Feed on Offer library online, which is great to show you visually your area, different types of plants. So you might get a really good indication of that. The other option is to do your own feed testing, and that's a really good way because you can take your own photo of the feed, get a little bit of height in it, a little bit of, what the ground cover might be. You can do some pasture cuts to assess the actual weight and the kilograms of dry matter per hectare. There's some calculations for that you could do. And then you can send it off for a feed test. So you can kind of link up your feed test with what that photo looks like, if that's a typical type of feed on your farm, and that can help you for future reference. And you can build your own library then of what your plant types are on your farm. So when we look at quality versus quantity, right now we're at this little short green peak stage, because we've had a couple of showers of rain, which has been lovely. And this is just an example of a 500 kilograms of dry matter per hectare and what that actually looks like. So you can see our clovers here, they're just starting to get going, saying autumn, it's winter now, we've had this late break, but you can probably relate what's going on here. So we've got this really short green pickered clover, very good energy, good 12 to 13 megs they'll have in this clover sample. The grasses, you can see here, a little bit taller, obviously, just to see how grasses grow compared to a clover growing across the ground. Slightly lower in energy. They won't quite have the digestibility and higher energy as a clover, but that will give you an indication of what 500 kilos will look like. And this is what it looks like really across the paddock as well. So You can see bare spots, you can see plants that's probably got more than 500, and it's really a matter of getting across the paddock and having a look at 8 to 10 spots across the paddock to get a bit of an average of what that might be looking like. Now we've got the MLA pasture rulers. That's an example. If you don't have one already, you can jump online and grab them off MLA, and they're quite durable and handy, and they have the height there and gives you an indication of that kilograms of dry matter per hectare, and on the back it's if it's suitable for different classes of stock. So that can be a really valuable tool. We've also got from the LLS, they've made an adaptation, this little quadrant one here that you can see makes its own little quadrant, and it can be used as well. The LLS has them available, and they've got a lot of the information from the MLA on there too. So in terms of what the sheep could eat when they have very short green feed at around 500 kilograms, they can't physically eat a lot. They do spend a lot of time trying to eat that feed, especially if it's been dry. They love a bit of green pig. But in terms of what they can physically, their intake, what they can physically eat, it's not that high. So even if we got that really nice clover type pasture, during pregnancy, they can only actually sort of eat off it, even though it's 11, 12 megs, they can only physically eat off it a day, about 5.5 megajoules. Once they've had that lamb, the singles will eat around 8.5 megajoules, and the twins are closer to 9.5 roughly megajoules a day, just because it's so short. And it's, the megajoules per day sort of gets worse as the quality of the feed that it, isn't as good as those nice rich clovers. So something just to think about there in terms of what they can physically get off the paddock when you have short green feed. So I've just added in here what they actually need. And so we've got out this same table down here for 500 kilos of dry matter. And up here we have a large frame Merino ewe to maintain her in condition score 3, which would be lovely the whole time. But obviously coming up to lambing time, that's what we aim to do. For twins, we want them above condition score 3. But you can see here that even a dry ewe needs 9.5 megs a day, and she's just not quite going to get that at all, just because the feed's so short. So we need to look at either topping her up or some other options, which we'll get into in a minute. So you can see here, just to expand further on, after scanning, how we see this increase, this is in megajoules a day, of what that new ewe needs. So they roughly, up until about scanning time, they pretty much need, 10 to 10.5 megajoules a day. After sort of that day 84, day 90, we start to see the twins need a lot more energy as they're coming up to lambing. Okay. So I've talked a little bit about condition score, just a bit of a recap on condition score. It's looking at the short ribs of the sheep, so not the long ribs, that's fat scoring. The condition scoring is looking at these short ribs here. We're looking at the spine down to the short ribs and really assessing how much muscle and fat cover is over the spine and short ribs and over that muscle. And a really good indication of where that ewe is at in terms of her nutrition status. Because they can use both fat and muscle, it's a really good option there and a really accurate option to see how her body conditions and holding up and where she's at. So it's much more cost effective to try and maintain condition score 3, and I'll give you some numbers in a minute, rather than letting her sort of drop down in condition, then trying to pick her back up for lambing or joining, especially if you have seasons that are inconsistent and not happening all the year. So it's good to sort of be in front of the game and being able to assess that condition score along the way to pick up anything before it happens. You can't always tell when they've got their jacket or wool on. So I like to condition score the ewes anytime that they're in the yard. So good timer for this is at the end of joining, when we're pulling the rams out. Scanning time's excellent, because that's when we start to see singles and twins needing different energy requirements and allocating better feed resources to the twins. Pre-lambing, so you can do any last minute sort of fine tuning there. Obviously, weaning time's a good time too, and then shearing and crutching. So when they get their wool off, a lot easier to see, and you can still get your hands on them as well, and have them there just to see where they're at and how they're tracking. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about maintenance versus production feeding. And what I mean by production feeding is really keeping the ewes in good condition to make sure that they're productive as they can. So to do that, we might not need to start feeding early. So that's what I mean by a little bit of short-term pain for long-term gain, is that we might need to start feeding early, and it's another job we need to do, but it's much easier to do that to get those performance, productivity, lambing time and or conception. And we talked a little bit about earlier about all that fetal programming that goes on while that ewe's pregnant as well as her own, wool quality too. So that's really important part to try and keep her condition score up even through early pregnancy. We probably sit and forget a little bit about during that time, but there's a lot going on that we can help her out then for the progeny and for her coming up to lambing. And then also the importance of pregnancy scanning, so we can really allocate these scarce and expensive feed resources to the ewes that need it. So being able to scan, you can take those dries out, take the freeloaders out. They don't need to be fed. They preferably be sold. And then concentrating on our singles and twins, and really concentrating on our twins that need that extra feed. And if we can keep and aim for more production type feeding, is that we will have more ewe survival, more lamb survival, the option to sell more surplus ewes later on, better wool sales, and obviously lamb sales as well. So when I talk about maintenance, it's really about maintaining them in condition score 3 if we can. Or close to it. And so rather than something like maintaining them in condition score 2, that's really more about survival and just keeping them alive till the season breaks. We can aim to keep them in condition score 3. That's when we're actually production feeding. So the maintenance and production can get a little bit sort of misinterpreted sometimes. Maintenance can be for maintenance in good condition score, which is production feeding, or maintenance is survival, let's just keep them alive feeding. So to give you an example here, there's a lot of numbers, but I've just grabbed our large frame ewe, 60 kilo ewe. Now to maintain her in condition score 2, which is quite skinny compared to condition score 3, they require, just when they're dry even, they need around 8 megajoules a day. Now, if we would like to maintain her in condition score 3, we're looking at 9.3 megajoules a day. So the difference is, 1.2, 1.3 megajoules extra just to keep her in condition score 2, rather than let her fade down to condition score 3. And you'll only know she's in condition score 3 if you can get your hands on her and condition score them. So this difference in energy, we actually can do that quite easily, and that's through containment feeding. And we've got some really good figures to show that, which are just here, that out in the paddock and the drought paddock conditions where they're looking around, they're walking everywhere for feed, we've had to just shift to a medium frame ewe because that's what's on our feed budget tables, but just comparatively it's the same. So we've got a medium frame ewe needing around 8 eggs a day to maintain condition score 3. But when we put her in confinement, because she's not walking everywhere, she's not walking to eat, she's not walking grazing everywhere looking for food, she's not going to the dam or the trough for water, her maintenance requirements come down. So we actually save pretty well straight up at 1.3 megajoules a day, and per head. So that can add up really quickly. And, our feet, what they actually need to keep going for the day just to maintain the condition score is really quite low. So what this looks like is that it comes out to 1.3 megs a day saving is 9 megajoules a week, which is 900 grams of oats, or around 700 grams of barley per head per day. Now, if you've got 1,000 ewes, just as a nice easy number, that's starting to get some numbers with your feed. That's sort of getting up there with what sort of feed amounts that they need. You multiply that out by 4 to get a month's worth. So you can start to see how you can have that saving in grain, having them in confinement rather than out in the paddock. So we get a really nice saving on energy with those sheep. There's a little bit more labour involved, which we'll go over, but overall, I think it does save a lot of time. So when we containment feed, there's a couple of really, really good reasons. So one is to get them off the paddock. So when it's getting dry, obviously we want to get them off the paddocks to try and keep any rainfall that happens there, to let those pastures recover really quickly. And even now, when we've got this little bit of green pick and it's so tempting and you're sick of feeding and you just want to get them out, just to try and bear with it for a little bit longer, just to let those pastures get going, and you'll have that feed for a lot longer as well once they are. It gets a bit tricky, especially if you're coming up to lambing, because you don't want to lamb in containment. You need to get them out in the paddock. So leaving them as long as you can to let that pasture get away is a really good use of the tool of containment feeding. I find too that whilst you sort of, they're everyday feeding, for example, you're not driving around paddocks all over the place. So it's much easier to sort of have one point where, they're in that sort of same vicinity where you can run around and get the feed out, rather than sort of doing a lot of driving around and refilling and all that sort of thing. You can also be probably a little bit more strategic when they're in containment in who's in what pen. So your twins can all stay together, and your single bearing ewes, for example, and you can, feed the twins more. You don't necessarily have to have a different ration. They just will need more of the ration versus a single. So you can sort of really tailor that and save, best allocate your feed, saving some money there. Now, just to give you some rough numbers of when they would go into containment, just to sort of maintain their body weight, and these are really sort of basic sort of numbers, but because they save so much energy in containment, it works out pretty well. So it's really around 1% of their body weight in grain that they need. So a 50 kilo ewe, that's 500 grams, and a 60 kilo ewe, that's 600 grams per head per day. And of course, having some straw available or cereal hay too. So these are a couple of examples of just some bunk feeding here. This is actually our feedlot. These are visual just barriers between the fences to help them, bowling them over when we have lambs in the feedlot. And we've just cut the bottom wires out of the hinge joint here and let them feed out of the bunk. Now these two mixes are done with a feed mixer, where we mix the straw or hay in with the ration, but you can also trail feed just grain along there as well, and have your cereal, hay or straw in the paddock separately with them. Now, in terms of trough space, the minimums are sort of 15 centimetres for a double-sided trough, or 30 for a one-sided. I actually like 20 for a double or 40 for one-sided. They just need that, find that they need that bit of room, unless they're sort of off shears. But it's really the wool length that will determine how much space they need when they come in. In terms of water, there are some minimums on centimetres per head on your trough space, but I think flow rate's even more important, and making sure that it just refills quickly, and then you don't seem to have any too many issues with trough length. Try to have some in backup as well, just in case there's a pump failure or the tank's dry and whatever else it might be. On stocking density, the minimum for animal health is around 2 square metres per ewe, but we really like to aim for about 5, just to give them a little bit of space. We don't typically have too many issues with stocking density in our containment pens. We also wanted to touch on just with the price of feed at the moment, and it always gets scarce and expensive when it's dry, and it's looking at the dollars per kilogram of protein, or cents per megajoules of energy. And these are quick little calculations you can do. What we want to do is convert the dollars per tonne to cents per kilo. So that's a quick and easy one, divided by 100. So for $650 a tonne, that's 65 cents a kilo. And we simply divide that by the protein content of your feed. So if the lupin's at 34%, divide that by 34, gives us $1.90 per kilo of protein. And if you're comparing it against something like peas for the same price, or a little bit cheaper even, you'll find that the lupins will still be cheaper, because we've got this divided by 24% protein, and it's $2.70 per kilo of protein. So it's a really good way to compare protein sources economically, so you can help you make the best decision on what to buy. And the same is true for energy. So looking at cents per megajoule, so $350 for barley, for example, that's 35 cents a kilo, and you just divide it by the megajoules. So there's some standard values for grains that are available on the AWI website, wool.com, or you can have the feed test with you, and that would be even more accurate again. So I've just compared this one, barley to hay. Sometimes people might go one or the other, but grain is always far more economical in terms of cents per megajoule than hay is, but hay is still really important for animal health. So the biggest thing that when we bring them into containment and grain feed them is to be aware of this acidosis risk. And I think we've all probably pushed it a little hard at times and caused a little bit of acidosis, but I wanted to give you a bit of a rundown on the who's who in the zoo of starch content, which is the acidosis risk. So wheat's really at the top of the list there. It's sort of it's around 68% starch. Corn's an interesting one because it's higher in starch than wheat, but it's the form of the starch. It's sort of tied up with protein in the matrix in the kernel, which allows some of it to not be all broken down in the rumen with the rumen microbes. It gets through to the small intestine and is broken down by enzymes there. With a lovely quick release of glucose into the system. Great for lambing ewes to help colostrum production and milk production. Barley sits at around 58% starch, pretty tried and true barley in the system. Oats we know is a lot safer, sitting in the mid-40s. And interestingly, if you're not aware of it or not, peas and beans are a similar starch level to oats, which is fine. They're quite safe still. That's where they get a lot of their energy from. Lupins, great protein source. We don't really use them as an energy source, but just so you're aware, yeah, they basically have negligible starch, which makes them lovely and safe as well. So how to reduce acidosis. Now, this table up on the right here was out of the AWI drought lot book, and they found that almost 50% of the causes of mortality in the drought lot were from acidosis, and it's something we can pretty easily prevent through good introduction onto grain, not rushing it too quickly. And the biggest thing for that is also providing some good quality fiber. So it doesn't necessarily have to be, high protein. In fact, cereal, hay, and straw is good. It just needs to be fresh and palatable and something that they want to eat, not weather damaged, no mold, not full of dust or mice as well. So whatever we've got there that's fresh and that they want to actually go and eat, because they'll naturally go and eat that hay, and the more chewing they do, the more saliva they produce. Saliva contains natural buffers, and that will go down into the rumen and help buffer their rumen as well. There's different types of buffers we can add to the grain. So the most effective, I feel, is acid buff. It's got a really great honeycomb type structure, which soaks up a lot of the acid. Bicarb's been around forever, and it's probably was, what we used to use all of the time. It's just not quite doesn't quite have the buffering capability of acid buff. So it you need twice as much, but it's half the cost too. So there's only a certain point where you can use as much bicarb because it's not that palatable too. So acid buff, bicarb, and bentonite's still getting around a little bit. It's a type of clay, so it doesn't sort of change the pH like the above two will, but it's can play a role in that if you're used to using it. And also, obviously, having fresh, cool water for them to drink from to keep everything flushing through and doing its job. One tip in containment is to have your feed at the opposite end of your water trough just to reduce spoilage a little bit when they drop feed out of their mouth. Couple of things that you really need to be mindful of too is vitamin and mineral deficiency. So the biggest one, especially for pregnant ewes, is calcium deficiency. Grain is notoriously low in calcium and relatively high in phosphorus. So we really need to focus on getting what we want to aim for, about 2 parts calcium to 1 part phosphorus. So we really need to add a fair bit of calcium there to balance everything up. Otherwise, we end up with hypocalcemia, which is what this low calcium, which is what the ewe has on in this photo. You seem to get this little frog-legged effect at the back. With lambs, calcium deficiency happens more so post-weaning. So you've got sort of autumn-born lambs, weaning them in winter. if they haven't had the calcium too, even though they look fine at weaning, the stress brings on the calcium deficiency. So that's one to look out for. And we see it in wethers or rams through urinary calculi, water belly, the stones forming in the urethra. With prolonged grain feeding too, whilst that rumen can naturally produce the whole suite of B vitamins, when they're on grain for a while, the population sort of shifts a fair bit. And instead of the microbes will still produce B1 or thiamine, some microbes also produce thiaminase, which is an enzyme that breaks down thiamine. So we sort of can end up with B1 deficiencies, and they sort of look like they're blind or sort of stargazing a little bit. And that's a B1. Now that can be relatively easily rectified through a B1 injection. With AD&E, if we get that primarily through green feed, so when we're in a dry period, we're not obviously getting that. However, it is fat-soluble vitamin that's stored in the liver, and they can draw down on that for 3 to 4 months. So just be aware of when they'll use, or animals or sheep have last time had any green feed, because a simple AD&E injection will help them top them up for those important vitamins. So when we're looking at moving in or out of a containment area, it's really about assessing your pasture. So moving them in when we're dropping below 70% ground cover, and similarly at the other end, while we're now waiting for some green feed to get going, keep using the containment area as a tool till we can get that ground cover sufficiently up enough to hold those sheep for lambing, for example. It will very easily help them maintain condition score 3, because we've reduced their maintenance requirement for grazing and walking around everywhere. So really effective way to help maintain their condition score, which we can improve conception rates and or lambing rates. In terms of joining, we can certainly join in confinement. There's been some good work done on that. From the lambing side of things, we really don't want to lamb in containment. There's lots of mismothering going on. And so in getting them back out into a paddock or a bit more space, they always lamb a little bit earlier than you always think. So I want them out 2 weeks before lambing, just to let them settle into their paddock. Using the containment area too, once you've preg scanned, so you can allocate the feed to the twins more so than the singles, and be more cost effective and resourceful there. And then making sure that we're providing some of those minerals and vitamins to address some of those deficiencies when we're just grain feeding as well. And all of that can come into a feed budget really, really quickly and easily to show you what it's going to cost, and multiply that out by the number of ewes to look at how much feed you might need for an estimated period. In terms of resources, there's plenty available. The AWI has got loads of great resources there, which you can find on the website at wool.com, and Making More from Sheep as well. Some of those calculations I did, you can simply use the drought and supplementary feed calculator from the New South Wales DPI. That will help you put your ration together, and also tell you all the dollars and cents on the cents per megajoule and dollars per kilo that I spoke about as well. And of course, if you haven't done one already, a lifetime ewe management course will help you with feed budgeting, train you on how to condition score your ewes as well, and what targets to look for. If you've done an LTEM course, go grab your folder back out and have a refresh on that. And in a final summary, we just really want to focus on the plan, having some numbers down on an operational planner and a calendar of events for the year. Getting those numbers in of your sheep, so you can sort of benchmark yourself year to year and see how you can improve, and the areas you might need to work on or change. Look at your pastures, assess them, use your containment areas as a tool. Most years we use ours in our autumn break to buy some time to let pastures get away for lambing. The production feeding, so remembering that maintenance feeding at a good condition score is really effective, and just balancing out what your grain too, for whether you use a balance of pallet or some other vitamins and minerals in there, to make sure that we're not having any deficiencies and other issues going on. So yes, using containment area as a tool to preserve your ground cover as well. And then once you have all your numbers at the end of your cycle, is to plug them back in and have a look at, your lamb survival, your dries, what can we do better? And that's just going to help you allocate the feed resources to be more efficient and productive with what you do. And that's it, Fiona. So thank you for that, and take any questions.
Thanks very much, Nicole. Fantastic presentation, loaded with heaps of really good tips. We'll get on to a couple of questions now. The first question I have, Nicole, is calcium carbonate or lime effective as an acidosis buffer?
Yeah, it doesn't quite work the same as it does with soil, and that's because of the rumen environment and the pH. It just doesn't, it's not soluble enough. It doesn't dissociate to get that carbon ion away from the calcium to attach to the hydrogen, the acids in there. So that's why it's not really an effective buffer at all. It doesn't really do a lot in the rumen. So it's using something like sodium bicarbonate or acid buff has a much better attachment to those acids. Well, it's soluble, it dissociates, and then it can jump onto those acids.
Great, thank you. Next question that's come through. In a dry season, how best can we avoid twin land disease in late gestation ewes? And how can we prevent walk-offs by ewes having twins, leaving one behind? And this person is having these issues down in Victoria this year.
Yeah, I'm not surprised. So yeah, it's a tricky one because it's right now it's going to be hard to change the dial, but excuse me, it's really about planning beforehand. So making sure that you can condition score early on, throughout pregnancy, and trying to maintain that condition score at 3. That's going to significantly reduce your pregnancy toxemia, which is from a lack of energy as well. So we need to make sure she's got some body reserves to draw on, and or grain coming up to it. By using something like a containment area, let your pastures be there and out, growing hopefully, or not getting not fading away out in the paddock or chewed down to the ground. And that really, I find that's the biggest thing to reducing walk-offs with sheep. So it's so hard to try and feed them during lambing with them chasing and lambs and mismothering, but trying to keep your ground cover will really help the ewe stay on the birthing site, and improve her staying there, and rather than trying to work off and look for feed. Also, if you've got your energy right, make sure that they've got their minerals as well, because we don't want to have any sort of lazy, slow lambings that are caused by low magnesium or calcium, which are really important for muscle contraction. So getting that lamb out. So if she's a twin bearing ewe, we want her to get both lambs out relatively quickly. There's hormones that switch on at birthing time, which the ewe connects the smell with that lamb and knows that it's hers. It's only on for a short period of time. I think it's half an hour to an hour off the top of my head. And if it takes that long for the second or third lamb to be born, it's already switched off by then, and she won't associate that lamb that it's hers. So they're a nice, healthy, good, strong ewe with the right minerals at lambing, with some ground cover, and that's what we always aim for anyway, to try and reduce those walk-offs.
Thanks, Nicole. Another question, which I've heard come up quite a few times actually, pellets versus grain. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, I get this one a bit too. So I quite prefer grain, but we do grow grain, so that makes it a lot more economical for us. And we probably have more of the infrastructure for handling grain as well. So it really depends on how far from a grain growing area you are, or if you grow your own grain. I think pellets at times can be more economical because they can purchase at different times of the year. So sometimes they can be a bit more economical than grain. All the work's been done for you in a pellet. You don't need to add anything else. From that side of things, they're quite convenient and easy to use. So you sort of probably pay for that a little bit because there's some manufacturing costs involved, obviously, in making that pellet. I quite like grain. I think they chew it a little bit more. Pellets can move through the system a little bit quickly sometimes, depending on the makeup of it, and can potentially cause a little bit of hindgut acidosis sometimes. So it's depending on the situation. But I guess just make sure that, you know, where your pellets come from are from a reputable supplier, you know, that they're fit for purpose. You know, you're not feeding a feedlot pellet to a ewe, for example. You know, you want that fit for purpose type of thing, and also that they have good quality controls and policies in place. So yeah, it's a little bit to suit your system and how far away from really grain you are.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question's a little bit of a scenario one here. We have containment fed merino ewes and hoggets for the past 3 months. Other than a couple of cases of B1 deficiency, they've had a great run, which is fantastic. How do I know how do I now reintroduce this mob either onto pasture or they're thinking forage oats, and what would the time frame be? Any tips there, Nicole?
Yeah, so in terms of time frame, it's going to be at least 2 weeks, and that's because I want to make sure that they've had a pulpy kidney or clostridial vaccination. So your 5-in-1 61, because it takes 14 days for that booster vaccination to kick in. So if they haven't had, you know, a 61 for at least 3 months, they will need a booster, and it needs, allow for 14 days for that booster to kick in. I'd also make sure that they're full of hay, so you can start to wind back the grain that they've been getting. Make sure that they're eating plenty of hay, so you may need to put out, you know, another bale or something in that pen, for example. We want them full of hay before they go out on the crop, and we actually covered a lot about introduction on last week's webinar, which you can have a little listen to as well. But that's the main thing I'd pay attention to, is that change in feed, even though they've been on grain. Going onto a grain crop, it'll have a microbial shift as well as the clostridial bacteria that's in their gut too, and they certainly love a nice change like that and can get going. So we need to protect them against pulpy kidneys, the first and main thing. Fill them up with hay and or have some of the similar minerals that you might have out in the crop. Have them exposed to that as well. Get them used to it.
Great. What time do you think, Nicole, is most suitable lambing time?
Another good one. It really will depend on how your normal season looks. So spring is a really common time for lambing because there's a lot of feed availability. I talked about lambing in autumn and winter. We don't have a consistent springs, and they're often quite short, so we don't sort of get that long spring and extended into summer. Our springs cut off quite short, so we want to bring everything forward. Now we've also got the ability here to grow different types of crops that we can get in early as we're waiting for that winter feed to get away, so that sort of suits our system, as well as some lucerne and rain over summer to get that going. But it will really depend on having a bit of a holistic view of what your plants can do on your farm, your rainfall. Can you grow crops to get them onto earlier for lambing and weaning as well? So, and when you want to finish those lambs. So it's not really definitely a direct answer, but it's really a how it fits into your system. And too, if you're mixed farming as well, you've got sowing and cropping and stuff going on as well. So it all needs to slot together. So.
Yeah, it certainly does, and depends on your pasture curve, as you've said. So we've actually pushed our lambing back, so we're more into October now because that matches our break in spring. So yeah, have a look on your pasture growth. The last question I have for you is, how long should you keep twins and singles separate to feed post-weaning and prior to joining?
Yeah, so this is, again, monitoring by condition score. So I would keep them separate until they're basically the same condition score, which is hopefully, you know, back up to 2.7 or better, because really those twins will need extra time or better feed as well. Not necessarily extra time, but better feed to rebuild that condition. They'll probably be a good half a condition score, you know, lower than the singles. So they need that extra feed. So depends what feed you have available that they're going to pick up on. But, you know, if you keep monitoring them by condition scoring them, once they get to the sort of similar condition score, that's when I would look to box them back together, and you can class them or mix and match how you like then.
Thanks, Nicole. Reading this question, I'm not quite sure if the person asking is talking about breeding ewes or lambs. So that would be what we do for breeding ewes. I suppose, Nicole, for lambs, we just run the weaners in whatever management groups we chose. And of course, we're looking at growing them based on weight and measuring their growth rate based on weight rather than body condition score in that case.
Yeah, that's right. So if they're replacement ewes or maidens, obviously coming up to joining, the maidens will be a combination of being 80% of their standard reference weight. So they have a weight minimum that they have to hit. So their adult standard reference rate. So standard reference weight is in condition score 3, no fleece, dry ewe, and I think I'm missing one right this second. So yeah, you can just go through. So we want to make sure that she's at least 80% of the adult standard reference weight. So there's a weight factor and condition score factor for maiden ewes. But in terms of growing them out, yeah, we don't sort of condition score weaners, for example. We just want to make sure that they're hitting their growth rates, and the Winning with Weaners information day is really good at that because it helps you hone in on some targets on weight that you really want to hit along the way. And it will also take into consideration the protein side of it, which those young lambs really need, even more so than ewes need protein, but even more so for lambs that are trying to build frame and muscle and growth and wool as well. So it's most certainly check out the Winning with Weaners program to really hone in on the weaner requirements there.
Great. Thanks, Nicole. That brings us to the end of today's webinar. So it was wonderful to have you online again today and sharing with us your wealth of knowledge. It's always a treat. You're always full of great information, and I know that our viewers always give us good feedback on the content of your webinars. So thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks, Fiona. Thanks, everyone.
And join us next month in July for a webinar on the productive flock. We're going to talk all about hitting your targets, working out which targets you need to be really focusing on in order to reach your goals. And we're going to be joined by Jim Metcalf, who's from JM Livestock. And if you happen to read The Land recently, he did an article around this topic. So have a look at that before you join us next month in July. We're looking forward to his webinar. So thanks, everybody. That's all from us today at AWI Extension New South Wales. Bye for now.